Thank you, Jessica. And I'd like to record my thanks to the organizers, particularly to Gary. Maybe he's not around, but for inviting me and also asking me to share perspective on harm reduction in India, which is essentially a complex situation in my opinion. And so I thought I shared that with you. As I'm sure most of you know, that India is the house to 1.34 billion people. Demographically a very young country, because 65% of this population group is under 35 years of age. So youthful, but also vulnerable, because young people like to experiment. So, and if you compare with EU, then you know this population is several fold higher than entire EU, both in terms of total population as well as the youngsters, the youthful population. India also, of this population, 2/3 of the population lives in the villages, the rural areas. Complicates it further. And of course, it's a multilingual. We have 250 languages in the country, and multicultural and various other complications to what we are talking of, that harm reduction. For historical reasons, India is the second biggest producer of tobacco in the world, and also second biggest consumer in the world. So approximately 800 million kgs of tobacco produced every year, and 12% of the world's smokers are living in India. What is very interesting that the pattern of tobacco usage is not only cigarette smoking that most of you are aware. In fact, that's the smallest of the population group, and I'm going to tell some more about it. The largest segment is almost 55% is smokeless tobacco consumers. About 45% all kinds of smoking. So the major chunk is non-smoking, or what is called chewing tobacco. And the pattern shows considerable variation in the population. For instance, of all the smokers, men constitute nearly 83%. So the consumption of tobacco by men predominates, women in minority. And amongst men and women, women, 87% of them prefer to use smokeless tobacco because they don't like to be seen smoking a cigarette. Slightly different in this. And we have dual users, both those who smoke as well as use the smokeless tobacco. Dual user is a very complex scenario. It includes almost everything under earth. So it's a complex one. Now, when I analyze these three, what I call the legal cigarette, something which is more accounted for, then we know that almost 120 million smokers in India are using what I call it legal cigarette. So it's more accounted for. The cigarettes have huge variation. I think it's because of economic disparities that is very apparent in many low and middle income countries. And just three figures. On the left side, you see the standard cigarettes with filter. In the middle is shorter cigarettes with filter, and is to do with pricing and economics. And the extreme right shows cigarettes without filter. So we have all kinds of choices there. But the larger segment of smoking population in India, and that's almost 240 million, so almost 2 times, I call it the local variety or alternative forms of cigarette smoking, which has deep economic, cultural, and other roots in India. There are bidis and hookahs and chillums of all kinds. And public perception is that this form of smoking is safer, and of course it is cheaper. In bidis, for instance, If you can look here, it's dried leaf in which tobacco is rolled, and that's what is smoked. So there is no paper, and people believe that it's safer. In this form, you smoke tobacco directly into filling up in this kind of pots, and a huge amount of smoke. So it's a huge variation. And of course, there is a water filter related hookahs, and so all kinds of variations you have. And this I call the second type of smokers. But the largest segment of population, and estimated to be, and it's only an estimate, and I believe it's only tip of the iceberg, because neither the local variety is regulated, there is hardly any regulation there is hardly any accounting there. And the chewing tobacco, the population is 440 million, that is estimate, and I believe it is not the real figure, it's much below the real figure that should be in the country. You have a huge variety of choices. They are packaged into small sachets, so very, very cheap to and very convenient to eat. And you can imagine the impact. It's a popularity that even Pierce Brosnan, the James Bond character, came for advertising one of these products. It's not really tobacco, it's their claims to be tobacco free, but it's betel nut and many other things perhaps as dangerous. So it's a huge, huge problem. So under this kind of diverse situation, how do we take harm reduction prospect forward? Obviously, since the population group and most vulnerable are the youngsters who are adventurous and so on. They like to have choices. They don't like to be told don't smoke or quit or don't chew betel nut or tobacco in any form. So whatever harm reduction ought to be appealing to them. This should be acceptable to them. There are also, because there are 3 different types of tobacco exposure routes available, the harm reduction also ought to be graded to meet their requirements so that actually it can bring in public health benefits that is most desirable. Because we have a huge, huge problem in the country, and as the life expectancy is on the rise, it's going to be major issue. Perhaps it's a time bomb ticking to really blow. So, of course, I believe, and we have been practicing, we've started. I'm relatively new in this field with tobacco, but we started, and our experience indicates that there ought to be awareness and advocacy first. People must be told what they are doing. That is mostly not said, or said in a guarded words that is a double meaning, so it goes on like that. No tobacco, of course, remains the best option. But second best option is harm reduction, where more choices must be made available to population groups. And there ought to be regulations. They must be reasonable and just. They must be facilitator rather than obstructive. And in India, we have started with some states in the provinces in the country where e-cigarettes, for instance, has been banned. Thank God, COP7 did not really go to that extent. But there is a need for this. And I have some data which I say that it's a data trend because Konstantinos and we started doing a survey in India to actually look at that. And we found that your standard tobacco harm reduction strategies reach only cigarette smoker. That's the smallest population group. But when but they are urban, they are more aware, they are more educated, economically also strong. And when we look at the data trend, then you can see that ENDS, I prefer to call ENDS rather than e-cigarette because I believe it's a kind of misnomer. ENDS has the perception, it's only a data trend, so I don't say that it is conclusion, but it's very encouraging to think that 72% of smokers think that they have quit smoking. or reduced it 18%. So predominant 90% have benefits of all kinds. Even chewing tobacco cessation effort is quite encouraging, not so much as cigarette smoking. The perception is that the ENDS is safer alternative, but it needs to be taken forward. And also that the well-being of smoker, vapor who is using ENDS is improved. That's a general perception. So that's for cigarette, the legal cigarette smoker. For BDs and all those people who smoke, and that's 240 million at least, there is no penetration of harm reduction concept at all. So we need very aggressive advocacy and awareness and cost-effective alternatives, because these people are smoking those local varieties because it's also cheaper. So the grading that I said of harm reduction approach has to be different. And the last segment, which is the largest segment, the smokeless tobacco, the chewers, which is 440 million at least, and maybe several fold higher. There is virtually no concept of harm reduction. So we need an initiator kind of harm reduction concept, advocacy, and highly cost-effective alternative, and maybe snus or something equivalent to that, because they are used to putting something in mouth and perhaps some alternative like that. So I would say that in India we need a graded approach to first make people aware of it, give alternatives. It should meet their expectations and habits and requirements. And we have a very, very long struggle, I would say, to address this awareness part to the population, which is large and diverse. We have linguistic barriers. So, and you cannot have one strategy which goes, because it has to be translated into many things. Thank you very much. My colleagues are here. Konstantinos and I have started this, the data trend that I shared. We have to do something more. My two colleagues and Dylan, who helped me with logistics for coming here. Thank you very much.